in the match, and what an outstanding performance. One of England's greatest fast bowlers has come back in this side, proved why he's one of the best. And a big victory as well, 269 runs.
Here comes the sun.
Perseverance is a heaven of a thing. Just a couple Ashes series ago, I saw Stuart Broad and thought Stuart Broad was finished. Stuart Broad is still going strong and finished off the West Indies in this series. Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. Joe Root and England have regained the Wisden trophy following a dominant performance in the third and final test against the West Indies. Player of the match and player of the series, Stuart Broad took 4 for 36 and Chris Wokes 5 for 50 as England won by 269 runs, as we noted. Broad recorded match figures of 10 for 67 and led all bowlers with 16 wickets in the series, despite missing out on selection for the first test. The 34-year-old also snared his 500th test wicket in this match when he trapped Craig Brathwaite LBW for 19 in the second innings. Joining us to review the match and the series is our English-based correspondent, David Brooke. David, welcome.
Thank you very much, George. Good evening, Lance and George.
Good. As we pick over what happened in this test series and look at it we have to look at it from two perspectives, the West Indies vantage and the England vantage. Let's start with the West Indies. A lot has been said about the players since the second test, the first session of the second test when things started to go awry, and throughout that test and throughout this third test about the players. Is it unfair to say, well, what about those guiding the players? What about management and the coaching staff? How well did they help the players to make the right decisions before the game started, during the game, and how well did they work in trying to not even improve, but to catalyze the players to give consistent performances throughout the series?
You're a polymath, George. I know you're a big football man. And if it was a football match that we'd just seen where your team had gone 1-0 in front and then lost 2-1, we'd be looking at the management, wouldn't we? We'd be talking to the management and saying, where did it go wrong tactically? And before, we wouldn't necessarily be criticizing the players. We'd be talking about the management. And I think you've hit it on the nail on the head there, George, because I'm struggling to see what the management team really added by way of support to the players. We always knew it was going to be a tough assignment, but to surrender that 1-0 lead, and I think you can point to a number of mistakes that were made sort of off the field, if you like, from the very start. Bringing over 25 players, represented an opportunity. I don't quite understand why the 15 were named so early. Even before the warm-up match. I don't believe the English Cricket Board asked for any such consideration. The lack of flexibility in the team selection. We kept seeing the same team. The West Indies only used 12 players. We discussed at length, I think. We anticipated the issues with Channing Gabriel. Most people could, that he wasn't going to be able to play 3 back-to-back. And Jason Holder, the disappointing thing was the way in which West Indies folded today, and Jason Holder saying that the players were worn out mentally. Well, what about some of the fresh, the fresh minds and fresh legs in the rest of the team that they were carrying, the squad, with some very talented players in it? And as you said earlier in the series, they couldn't do any worse than the incumbents, and the incumbents demonstrated again that they weren't going to do any better. So we had this sense of Groundhog Day, of history repeating itself. And also, the wrong advice about the toss from the management. And also, I just got the feeling, George, that no one seemed particularly bothered. The coach didn't front up at the end of the game today. It was left to Jason Holder to front up in the press conference after the match. And when the coach did appear, he didn't seem too bothered. Looked like the guy that's got, the decent contract, 4 years worth, and no immediate pressure on him. And I'd have liked to have seen more acknowledgement that mistakes were made in terms of not correcting errors during the tournament. And I think for that, you have to look fairly and squarely at the management and say, what did they actually add over the course of the series? We saw how England learnt from mistakes during the series and corrected, made some enterprising selections, leaving out a batsman for this final test match. So they were able to field 4 pacers. West Indies seemed to go the other way and lose momentum and surrender a winning position. And for that, I think, you have to point a finger at the management.
So, given your proximity to the action, you are in England watching this thing at close quarters. Your verdict on the management, you've outlined several reasons, or you've given several points why you believe the management ought to have done better. Would you say that based on what you saw, the management, the coaching staff, the players failed to give adequate support on this tour?
Well, I didn't see they added anything. Yeah, I think the pressure was all on Jason Holder, and the players will cop the brunt of the criticism. We're already seeing that, with Shea Hope singled out and John Campbell and others perhaps who didn't perform. But I think you have to say, right, what about the team selection? We had, the West Indies had the benefit, because of the unique circumstances of this tour, of 25 players to choose from, the cream of the Caribbean crop and the cream of the next generation. And to see Shamar Holder shivering on the boundary, fulfilling his 12th man duties today, rather than having had a chance to make an appearance during this series. And others that you could point to, from Josh Da Silva to Ray Reefer to Nkrumah Bonner. I'd like to have seen. Shane Thomas was there to call on in the reserves, and I think you have to ask those questions, George.
What does it say, though, David, about the difference between the teams and the difference in the quality of the individuals that both coaching staffs would have led when England made 369 in the first innings and almost everyone everywhere felt that the West Indies were going to lose from there? Because I'll say this to you, if the West Indies had batted first and made 369, not many people would have said, well, this is over. But England makes 369, and it's almost, as Simon Croskill, who used to sit right here, would say, good night, sweet prince. Doesn't that say something about the quality, the gap in quality between the two teams?
Well, I think you can legitimately point to the batting and say that in England, Sibley and Stokes in particular rose up above the norm and contributed performances by getting those big centuries. And as we know, Jermaine Blackwood was the closest to getting a century. So, I'm not saying that it was completely even Stevens, but, it's only a year since that series in the Caribbean. I don't believe there was such a big difference in class. Very difficult conditions away from home. Any team would have struggled against Stuart Broad, broader than Broadway, and James Anderson in the way that you just, any team would have struggled. Chris Wokes, of course, chipped in with his 5-wicket haul, slightly eclipsed by Stuart Broad today. Any team would have struggled, but I think, why were England in that position? Because they'd been given first go. Why had they been given first bat? Because perhaps lacking the confidence, the captain and staff may have lacked the confidence to have taken the first go, lacking confidence in that West Indies top order. And I think that signal is transmitted to the players. And whether they needed a psychologist on tour or just an extra bit of strategic contribution, that weakness needed to have been corrected, because clearly these players are capable of a lot more. Jason Holder is not there as number one all-rounder when we started the series for nothing. So, yes, there may have been a gap in English conditions, but I don't think that gap was reduced by any contribution coming from the coaching staff.
David, based on your pronouncements of a few seconds ago, I suspect that you're a huge Barrington Levy fan. And I know you love your music and so on. But can you talk to me quickly about the West Indies batting? I know you spoke about the management and decisions and bringing fresh players in and so on. But the last 3 innings the West Indies played in this series, they scored 198, 197 and 129. Batting collapse. Where would the responsibility for the batsmen lie, as opposed to team management and other decisions made around the team?
Well, obviously, every batsman that's selected has to take responsibility for their own performance, Lance. But I detected in this, certainly in the last day, a lack of collective resolve, to save this match. I don't think anyone, even the West Indies fan, strongest fan, would have saw the real fight to save the game and to hold on to this Wisden trophy. And so, there's somehow that the motivation or getting players into the right frame of mind and sorting out the technical issues. The Sky broadcast today was full of endless replays of players West Indies batsmen being stuck on the crease. On first sight, the Craig Brathwaite dismissal looks as though the ball kept low, but actually it's a very full ball from Broad. And most of the wickets he got were from very full balls. And there's the West Indies players back on the crease, taking with a lot more, like even when John Campbell was out to that short lifter in the first innings, replays showed that he could have he could have been using his crease more. So whether it was getting on front or back, there seemed to be some technical issues there that weren't being sorted out. Maybe Tino's friend Brian Lara, could have contributed something to this performance. It needed someone who's been there and done it, who that could have instilled that necessary confidence, I think, in the West Indian team.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been an easy time for the captain Jason Holder post-match today to face the media, David. And this, of course, is just the latest in a long list of West Indies captains who have had uncomfortable time with post-match interviews stretching all the way back from the 1990s with Brian Lara. And it started with Richie Richardson, because in 1995, that's when the decline started. But I heard Jason Holder talk about, and you alluded to it just now, about the players being worn out. It's been a long series for them. And because of the biosecure nature of the series, he didn't use this word, but it seemed to be a boring period where they were just doing the same things all the time. They were in the same places all the time. Do you buy that coming from the captain as part of the reason why the team declined so much in the last part of the series?
Well, I think it was a challenging assignment for any team, and I don't think that Jason Holder did get that uncomfortable a ride in the press conference for this reason. I think the British media very much appreciate what Jason Holder did and the West Indies team did by coming here during a pandemic and putting themselves into this sort of biosecure environment, the quarantine period. Yeah, I could see that. And I think all the media were very sympathetic to when Jason said that it was very challenging for the players. And I think it would have been challenging for any team. Very intense bubble. You couldn't get away from the cricket. You're staying over the ground, and there's no way you can't go out of the hotel. So in the sense, the players were sort of left with too much time to contemplate, I guess. So overwhelming gratitude. And it's interesting that I think because of that gratitude to the West Indies team for being here and fulfilling this fixture, there is a feeling of what should the English Cricket Board now do for West Indies in return, because there was a lot of talk in the press conference about the very, very different set of resources that these teams are working with. The English cricket, by way of contrast, gets 220 million for its TV rights every year. The West Indies rights are worth something like 10 or 15 million. So 10, 15 plays 220. And at ICC level, I think there's a growing appreciation that something needs to change in the allocation of resources. Everyone's playing in the same test match tournament now, the same test match championship, and there needs to be a more equitable distribution of resources. Jason Holder said that in a biosecure environment, it would be impossible for anyone outside the big three to have staged this test series with all the attendant costs and none of the revenues coming from gate receipts or whatever. So Jason's well aware of that. The media are well aware of that. And I think the attention should quite rightly now be focused on what is the ICC going to do to give us a more equitable distribution of revenue, not just for West Indies, but for all the nations outside of the big three.
David, the issue of, they always say in sport, especially the cricket, that you're as good as your last performance. So you would have only seen him this once for the West Indies. But what did you make of the performance, the contribution of Rakeem Cornwall?
It's not a debut that he would look back on, I don't think, with any great satisfaction. He didn't look penetrating with the ball and didn't look like he would stick around with the bat, and the usual infallibility of his slip fielding, he did drop a reasonably easy one. And I think in terms of the balance of the team, it meant that Roston Chase, the West Indies player of the series, you'll be pleased to hear, George, because I know you were a big advocate of Roston Chase, and and he was justifiably picked by Chris Silverwood, the England coach, as West Indies man of the series. But Cornwall's inclusion meant not only that Alzari Joseph didn't play, or a fourth seamer didn't play, but it meant that Roston Chase bowled a lot less overs. And so Roston Chase, who'd been doing extremely well, he's got to see himself as a frontline bowler. It allows West Indies to play the four quicks. He didn't really get much of a look in. So overall, I'd say probably a negative contribution from Rakeem. Maybe it wasn't the conditions for him, and maybe West Indies would have done better, with great benefit of hindsight, to have fielded the four pacers. All
right, I want to take you on a little exercise in the short time we have left, David. I'm just going to speak about, just mention some individual West Indian players' names, and you mark them out of 10 for me. I know you didn't prepare, but you've seen all of the cricket in this series, so you would have a good shot of getting it right. Jermaine Blackwood out of 10.
8.
I
thought he played very well. The best batsman in the West Indies team.
Shamar Brooks.
I'll give him 7.
Craig Brathwaite.
4.
Roston Chase. With the bat.
7.
With the bat.
7.
All round.
All round performance, 8.
All right. Dowrich. With the bat.
5.
With the gloves.
4.
Jason Holder with the bat.
5.
Jason Holder all round.
7.
Shea Hope.
3.
John Campbell.
3.
Alzari Joseph.
5.
Kemar Roach.
7.
Rakeem Cornwall.
3.
Shannon Gabriel.
7.
Good chap. Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have some other business to take care of, yourself and myself. We'll get to that.
It's been a pleasure. Can I just say, it's been a pleasure and a privilege to join you on the best sports show on the network, the SportsMax Zone. Thanks very much, Lance. Thank you, George.
Excellent.
Really enjoyed it.
We're going to have some more stuff to do, because we have an ultimate T20 coming up as we build up to the Caribbean Premier League, the hero Caribbean Premier League. So don't go too far, okay?
Count me in.
All right. Good. David Brooke there. So those numbers, Lance, I deliberately, like a fast bowler running in and hiding the shine on one side of the ball, I hid that from him until the death, because I wanted to get it organically. I didn't want him to spend time pondering and changing the numbers.
Just off the top of the gut feeling.
It
was an eye test.
Do you agree with much of what he said?
I think everything he said I agreed with. Yeah, all of his ratings I concurred with. There was none that I would disagree with.
My producer in my ear is telling me that Shea Hope maybe got a digit too many.
He got 3?
Yeah.
So he should have gotten 2.
That's what he's saying. I mean, there's no big difference between 20% and 30%. But I must say, cricket is a game of falls dawns. I hope this isn't a falls dawn for Jermaine Blackwood. I know he didn't get 3 figures, but that 95 should have been 3 figures, and it was worth its weight in gold, that 95. And there were other times where Blackwood looked at ease, looked accomplished, and looked, most importantly of all, Lance, skilled enough to deal with what the English bowlers were showing. I hope he kicks on from here. But much of the rest of the West Indies batting, from top order to middle order, they have a lot to work on. We take a break and come back with more.
Sun, sun, sun. Sun, sun, sun. That means they're avoiding. Sun, sun, sun. Here it comes. Sun, sun, sun. Sun, sun, sun. Sun, sun, sun. Here it comes. Little darling, I feel that access slowly Little darling, it feels
10 wickets in the match, and what an outstanding performance. One of England's greatest fast bowlers, has come back in this side, proved why he's one of the best. And a big victory as well, 269 runs.